It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show. Well, hello there. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. I am so very delighted that you have decided to join us, and we're going to have a lot of good stuff today. Later in the show, we're going to talk to Vi. She is an up-and-coming activist in the secular movement, and also sometimes now is on the Atheist Experience TV show out of Austin, Texas. One of my, my favorite atheist show, and definitely one of my favorite podcasts. It allows me to hear some of the wacky things that Christians and other people of other religious faiths bring up to defend, make arguments for. But the one thing they never, ever seem to have is actual evidence, and I stand by my long-held position. An argument is not evidence. An argument is an argument, and if an argument was evidence, it'd be called evidence and not use a different name. We wouldn't call it an argument. It would be evidence. So arguments are good fun and all, but it's not evidence, and still no one can seem to present evidence. So good fun. We'll talk to her about what she's doing, how she grew up, how she got out of religion, but I don't want to spoil too much of it. And also a little later on, I have a segment for the Investing Skeptically today about the FIRE movement, F-I-R-E, financial independence, retire early. And again, I don't want to spoil all of that, so you can listen to that. And a book that mostly inspired that movement is called Your Money or Your Life. And I might talk about that at the end of the show a little bit more, but I don't want to ruin the whole FIRE segment. Got a couple of other little wacky random things for the show. Of course, we are in the middle of October, and only a few days ago, a couple of friends, clients, business partners of Rudy Giuliani have been arrested in the United States. I think it went from 2 to 3, but I'm not 100% sure. And the investigations and inquiries continue. But the funny thing is, I happened to be in my car flipping through channels and accidentally got onto a conservative right-wing show. And it was just absolutely staggering, the stuff that they talk about and how Trump has been put out and harassed from day one, unlike any other president ever seen. Kind of language. And I thought, do you remember the guy before Obama, the one that they would draw pictures of and share pictures of him looking like a monkey or him hanging from a tree? They forget what they have done, or what people on their side have done very recently. And let's see, how many people were convicted from the Obama administration? Oh yeah, that's right, 0. So of course we have good fun with the Kurds, who for many, many years fought and died for their purposes, but also to help us, the United States, and maybe even the world, try to defeat ISIS. And they have now been given their reward from the United States government, a complete and total troop withdrawal, allowing Turkey to come in and bomb them and fight them and kill them. Yay. Yay, America. It's chaos in America. I only hope it can change. We do now have the impeachment inquiry has started, but they're not playing along, so it's going to be drawn out in the courts. And also, a couple of courts have now ruled that Donald Trump cannot hide his taxes from, I think it's the Southern District of New York, nor can he hide his taxes from Congress. honestly, I can't believe at this point someone hasn't released them. So fingers crossed, we'll get to see all of that at some point. I still have my money on money laundering is the thing that's going to end up putting him in jail, but who knows? Other fun topics, I just refinanced my house. My interest rate was already fairly low, but got down to 3.83, was really hoping for 3.75, but apparently it wasn't in the cards for me. And this is one of the fortunate side effects, I guess, maybe of a possibly soft economy created by tariffs and other bullshittery that Trump has engaged us in. You might be able to refinance your house at a nice low rate. Now, I was already at a reasonably low rate, and financing to this new lower rate is going to save me maybe $120 a month. So not a lot of money, and I don't have a really, really expensive house, although it's better than the average, so I got obviously no place to complain. But it's going to take me probably 18 months, hopefully not 24 months, to break even and cover the cost of refinancing. Although the funny thing with refinancing a home, depending on exactly when the date of the refinance occurs, you kind of get a buy month. You get a month where you don't have to pay the principal because it refinances starting the next month. So I do have that perk, but I'm not going to count that. But I just wanted to lock in the lower rate. And it's one of those things that people often talk about, and they have a great desire to pay off their house in retirement or before retirement, or it's one of the things necessary for retirement. Definitely not a bad way to go, especially if interest rates are high. However, today, in 2019, they're not high, they're low, and they've gone down. And it might be an opportunity if you're paying 4.5%, 5%, 6% or something higher, look into refinancing your home debt, the amount that you pay. And so I did some quick calculations on this, assuming I borrowed $300,000 at 3.83%. The principal and interest on that is $1,403. I'm not including the property tax. I'm not including the insurance. I'm not including any other things, just the principal and interest on the loan only, because I want to compare these to some other numbers. And instead of borrowing that $300,000, I could have paid it off. I have enough things that I could sell some stuff and pay $300,000 and have no home loan at all. And you might be tempted to do that because when you look at the total payments, the total amount you're going to pay for this loan, it's a little bit over $500,000. And that's often a number that people will compare and say, why pay an extra $200,000 in interest? And you know what? There's some merit to this question. Why would one want to pay that? And the simple answer is because I can make more money with the money. As an example, if I take that $300,000 and assume I'm going to make 10%, fine, you can argue with the assumption, and we'll play with that a little bit. But I take that $300,000 and I invest it in the stock market. Of course, this is not for everybody. If you are struggling to make your payment, maybe this is not the best idea for you. If you don't have a regular and consistent income, you probably shouldn't do something like this where you put it all in a total stock market, because in the short term, it can go down. We're talking about money that you don't need, you're not going to need, and you can invest. And I went to a website called bankrate.com, and they've got different kind of calculators, and they've got one that calculates the return on your investment. And I simply put in $300,000 and an annual rate of return of 10% for 30 years. And if you check the Wikipedia entry for the S&P 500, the average annual return for the U.S. stock market, as measured by the S&P 500, over the last 48 years is slightly over 10%. So this is not a crazy number. It's a high number, but it's not a crazy number. And you won't imagine, just guess, I guess is what I want you to do first. Guess, how much does $300,000 turn into after 30 years? just give you a few seconds. Think about it. 300,000, grind at 10%. We don't live in a geometric world, but investments grow geometrically. We live in a linear world where a lot of people can't even do the math at a cash register, and they have to punch in the numbers to figure out how much change to give you. That $300,000, if you make 10%, and I'm assuming you add no money, I'm assuming that you pay no tax on it, because these are all just assumptions. We're playing a little game. Just work with me for a minute. It turns out to be worth $5.234 million. So instead of paying off that $300,000 that I owe on the house, I'm going to borrow money under 4%. I'm going to pay an extra $200,000 in interest. But that $300,000 over the next 30 years, the time that I have the home loan, it's going to turn into $5.2 million. I know, it is mind-blowing. So debt is a tool, and like any tool, one must use it wisely. If you have a 21.99% interest rate on a credit card with a $5,000 balance, that's the tool not being used correctly, and it's going to hurt you. But if I can borrow money under 4%, and I haven't even talked about the fact that the interest on that loan might be tax deductible. I'm assuming it's not for the purpose of this calculation, but it probably is, or at least part of it, and that those rules can change and do change, as we know. And so you say to yourself, but Phil, I'm not going to make 10%. I might make only 7%. So let's put that in a calculator. I'm going to update the button. The money turns into $2.3 million. So if you can make the payments comfortably, if you have sufficient revenue, earnings, income of some kind, for me, I'd rather borrow $300,000 and keep $300,000 invested, because I'm going to make a whole lot more money, even at a very conservative 7%. And let's say I make 5%. It turns into $1.3 million. So it doesn't take a whole lot of risk to be ahead. Now, keep in mind with the investment, if as soon as you do this, the stock market falls 30 or 40 or 50%, it's going to look really fucking stupid in the short run. You've made a horrible mistake. This is not something you try. It's not something that, let's give it a whirl and see if it works. This is a lifelong philosophy of how you manage money. Of course, if the interest rates currently were 8.5%, I wouldn't be doing this. I would be more interested in paying off the home loan, because if you are paying a 8.5% loan off, it's like a risk-free guaranteed rate of return of 8.5% by paying that down. So a little more than I probably planned on doing with that. A little discussion on that. The other thing that I heard on this crazy conservative website thing, podcast that channel I was listening to in my car on, Sirius XM now, because they merged, was all about how the rich people pay all the taxes. And one of the numbers they threw out, and it's something I've heard many times before, was this idea that the top 1% pay about 40% of the taxes. And I thought, I've heard that before. I've heard that thrown around as the defense for the rich, that they're just getting soaked. So I thought, I'll do a little research. I haven't done a ton, just a little research, found some websites. And if you've come up with something better, that's cool. One of the websites I went to is Tax Foundation, taxfoundation.org. And I'm pretty sure this is a conservative think tank. So they're going to have the most favorable numbers for themselves. And I also have a nice article from CNBC. I'm going to pull some stuff from there, and I'll try to keep the two separate. The Tax Foundation website is talking about, and they have some older numbers here from 2016, that the top 1% earners pay 37% of income taxes. Now, they mean federal income taxes, and what I heard on the show is 40%. Maybe it's gotten a little higher. Maybe it got a little lower. They're rounding, but it's not wildly wrong. And they also throw out another number that says, hey, to be in the top 1%, you only have to have an average income in the United States of around 500,000. Correct that. I went to the CNBC page. I think this is a better number, 400,000. And so if you make $400,000 or more a year, 420, 450, something like that, you're in the top 1%. Now, I know I have some listeners, because some of them are clients, that make money like that. And yay you. That's very cool. The funny thing is they always use that number because that's the cutoff, that anyone who makes over that is in the top 1%. But if you take all of the top 1% earners and you calculate the average income that they make, it's 1.32 million. So some good portion make more than 1.32 million. Some make less than 1.32 million. So it accelerates pretty quickly. If you graph it, it looks like, a geometric curve on income. So you have that. And then the thing, of course, you wonder, well, if they pay 40% of the taxes, and again, it's being sloppy, it's 40% of the federal income tax, how much of the money are they making? Well, again, it depends on where you look, but let's call it 20%. So they bring in 20% of the adjusted gross income. And again, that can be tricky depending on how you look at it. And they're paying 40% of the taxes. So they're paying a tax rate higher than everybody else just by definition, because if they make only 20% of the money, earn 20% of the money and pay 40% of the taxes. This is highly disingenuous and misleading because this is not the only tax people pay. So for most people, the average person, they spend pretty close to 100% of what they earn. And when they buy stuff, they're paying sales tax. Maybe 5, maybe 7, maybe 8, maybe 9%, depending on what you buy and where you buy it. If you live in a big city, if you are in the top 1%, odds are you save a bunch of your money and you're not paying that tax. So that changes the rate, just that one thing. The other thing is that often, if you are low income, a greater portion of your money is going towards your housing. And you pay property taxes. You pay a lot of property taxes. If you're really, really wealthy, the amount of your real estate is likely, not always true, a smaller percentage, while still a nice big number, a smaller percentage overall. This is also earned income. So it doesn't include capital appreciation, stock dividends, and a lot of those, if you're really wealthy, you're going to only pay a 15 or 20% rate on those taxes. Social Security, just another thing pops into my head. You pay and your employer pays, but only up to about $120,000. I don't know the exact dollar this year off the top of my head. So if you make $500,000, you only pay that on the first 25% of your money. Everything after that, you don't pay that at all. So someone making less than you pays 7% on everything, and you might pay an average rate of 2% when you look at the total earning money earned. So this idea that you can pick out one type of earnings and one type of tax and go, oh no, the rich are paying too much, is disingenuous at best, and I think fraudulent at worst. And I don't like it, obviously. So that's another thing to think about when you hear that number, that the top 1% pay 40% of the taxes. They might pay 40% of the federal income tax. But don't cry too much for them because they're making a lot of money. And me personally, even though this might in some way affect me, I think people with higher incomes should pay more taxes. Now, have they worked hard to get to that place? A lot of them have. Some people just inherit wealth, and yay for them. But a lot of people work very hard to make that money. Sometimes they got a good education. Sometimes they got a whole lot of luck or happen to be in the right place at the right time. And sometimes it's just out of hard work. But it really is helpful if you had a family with some money and you didn't have to worry about things as you were growing up, and they could pay for you to go to a nice school and even a nicer college. So there's a lot of advantages built into that cake, even when you make it on your own. Anyway, getting off topic, We're going to take a quick little break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to hear about the FIRE movement, and then we'll have an interview with Vi.
I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
This Investing Skeptically segment is on the FIRE movement, F-I-R-E. When is it? Financially Independent Retire Early, F-I-R-E. And it's something that I've known about kind of casually for a while, but in the last couple of weeks, I have gotten a whole bunch of emails from a lot of listeners. So this is something that has suddenly become more prominent and more known or better marketed. I don't know what has caused this, but it's exciting because you might hear about it soon. And with a little luck, you hear it from me first. But obviously, all the people that wrote me did not hear it from me first. I don't always want to be on the cutting edge, but when something bubbles up to be a little more common and more in the media, it's something for us to talk about. It's a little hard for me to address it specifically because there's different people promoting different variants of FIRE investing, the FIRE movement. But the basic idea is that you should save something like 50% of what you make. And I will easily agree that if you save more money and spend less money, you will be able to retire considerably sooner. That's just how the world works. So if you save 50% versus 10% versus 20%, you can retire a lot sooner. And regular listeners know 10% is the suck-ass minimum, and it won't work for most people unless you start when you're in your early 20s, like from 22 to 62, it might work, or 22 to 65. But most 20-year-olds don't save that much, so 20% is a more likely successful number. And again, they recommend 50%. And again, they have another nice thought that the retire early means that you don't have to have your conventional day job, or you could keep your conventional day job if you really like it, but you don't have to. And that fits very well with my definition of being rich. And when you are rich, You do not have to work for the purpose of earning money. You may choose to do so, but you don't have to do so. And as an example of that, when my dad was in his mid to late 70s, he worked at Kmart as a greeter for lulls, for a laugh, for entertainment purposes, to get out of the house, to talk to people all day, because like him, or like me, I guess, I got it from him, he liked to talk to people all day long. And that's one of the coolest thing about my job, is I get to talk to people all over the country, and even in some other countries, sometimes all day long, and I love it. And so he got paid a few bucks an hour that he didn't need, and he generally had a little bit of fun doing it. And that's cool if that's something you want to do with your time. However, if you are struggling to pay the bills and you work as a Kmart greeter or a Walmart greeter, and every single check you need to get every single hour so you can pay your electric bill, or you might lose your power, your gas is going to get turned off, that sucks. I don't want that on anybody. So the FIRE movement idea is that you cut back, you cut way back, and they talk a lot about how to not spend money and how to save money. And it's something that is not my area of expertise. I've never been the best at saving as much as I always should. I think right now I'm generally doing 20% or more. So I watched a few different FIRE YouTube videos, and you can go to YouTube and look it up, or you can just Google it and find out some more information. And maybe it can actually help you come up with some ideas of how to save money. A couple things that they mentioned are things that I have talked about on the show. One, generally for most people, you should not buy a new car. Now, they had one video where a person would always buy 10-year-old cars for $3,000 or $4,000. That's one way of doing it. And if you can buy a 10-year-old car for $4,000 and get it to last for 4 years, your annual car expense is $1,000 a year. And of course, the car insurance is next to nothing. You might have some repairs, and it might not have all the safety features or some other kind of features that you want. But if your goal is to spend as little as possible, that's a really good strategy, because if you buy a $40,000 car that lasts 10 years, you're out $4,000 a year, not to mention the dramatically higher insurance. But, you also have a really cool new car, and might actually be a little safer. So it's all about these trade-offs. And of course, if you make money and live on half of it, and you rack that up, at some point you can retire. The question you have to ask is, what is the right balance for you? And I was delighted to see several of these videos pointed out something that I think is a obvious mathematical fact. This is easier to do if you make a lot of money. If you and your spouse or significant other each make well over $100,000 and your combined family income is $250,000, you can probably find a way to get by on $125,000 combined, unless you're in downtown New York or San Francisco. And even there, you could find a way. You could find a way to get by on $125,000, and you could save $125,000 per year and invest it, and in 20 years be able to retire. So if you started at 25, at 45, you're out. Great. However, if you're in small town America and you're a single parent with a couple of kids and you're making 30, 40 grand working 2 jobs, how do you live on half of that? That's going to be really, really rough to do. So that's something to keep in mind. Another thing they often talk about in these videos with the FIRE movement is having 4% to take out of your portfolio, which I'm okay with. I'm okay with that. I even had one that they said take out 3.5%. Normally, I say 5%. And I say 5% for someone who is retiring at a normal retirement age, 60, 62, 65. If you're retiring at 70 plus, you can even take out 6. If you're retiring close to 80, maybe even 7%. And at first people are like, whoa, the rule is 4%. How can you say 7? Well, if you're pushing 80 years of age, if you take 7% per year out of your portfolio, 10 years is 70%, 11, 12, 13, maybe 14 years you're going to go broke. So from 80 to 94, you can take out 7% per year And that's assuming your portfolio made nothing. So if your portfolio makes 3 or 4 or 5%, it can go a few more years. What are the odds? And I'll tell you, they're pretty low. What are the odds you're going to live past 98, 99, or 100? Now, if you want to leave a whole bunch of money to charity or to your descendants, you stick to the 4 or 5%. And again, the 5% works out really well for normal-ish retirement age. If you're 45 or 50 and you've done this FIRE movement thing and you want to retire, 4% is probably a really good idea. And if it means that you aren't ready to retire yet, that's cool. Work a couple more years and start with 4%. And if it goes really well and the market goes up for 2 or 3 years, great. You can always start taking out 5% at some future point. Or if your portfolio grows fast, your 4% ends up being a bigger amount anyway because you're still taking out 4%. But the one thing that I have never seen them talk about, and at least 2 of my very, very smart listeners mentioned this in their emails to me, that they've never heard any of these people talk about one of the topics that I mentioned, investment clarity, where you can take 4% of your portfolio out, but it sounds like they're just kind of taking 4% out of everything. Well, why not take 4% out of what is the biggest winner and avoiding selling what's the biggest loser? Because the long-term models or the analysis that you can find different websites to do this, I think they all kind of assume that when you take out 4% or 4.5% or 5% or 6%, that you're just kind of taking it out of the portfolio and on average across everything. But if you have a year where, let's say, large cap growth makes 22% and the rest of the stock market makes 10%, well, take the vast majority of your 4 or 5% out of the things that have just crushed it. It creates a systematic way where you're selling high and buying low. If you're adding money, you add to the areas that haven't kept up with the winning segments. And I think that adds anywhere from 0.5% to 1%, maybe a little bit more to your overall performance without altering the risk and maybe even lowering it a little bit. So that's something that you could add if you wanted to do the FIRE thing. But, go do some Googling, YouTube, and look at it. And it's, of course, something that I would encourage all listeners or even all clients to consider is saving more money. I do have the rare occasion, probably a few percentage points of clients that I have where I actually tell them to spend more money because they're on a pace to have so much money in retirement that they won't know what to do with it. And yes, we should all have such a problem. But I have had a few clients that have saved 50% or more for a long period of time, and they could retire now, but they don't want to. And that's cool. If you have a job that you like doing and you want to keep doing it for some more time, that's nice. It's nice to have the options, and that's what we want to get to. We want to get to the point where your portfolio is sufficiently large enough, and whether that means you retire at 62 or 70 or 50, but we want the portfolio large enough that you can now choose what you do with your time. And so it's always this trade-off between time and money and, I guess, comfort. Because if you save half of what you make, you're giving up a lot of things that you could do when you're 25, 30, 40, 45 years of age. Would you rather work a little longer and enjoy considerably more luxury in your 40s and 50s? That's up to you. It's something to think about, something to talk about. If you want to talk to me more about it one-on-one, of course, just email me, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com, and we can look. If you're already a client, we can look at your plan and see maybe how we want to change it. If you're just kind of curious about how it might work, do some Googling, or like I said, email me and we could talk about it. But that is a little bit on the FIRE movement, F-I-R-E, like the word fire, financial independence, retire early. The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Your investment should be based on your situation, and you should consult with your financial advisor before taking any action. The show may contain ads. These ads are placed into the show by the hosting company after I finish recording and editing. I have little control over the content of the ads, and you should not assume that I support their products or claims. If you choose to support the show via the new Patreon page, that support does not create an advisor-client relationship.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
Next up, we have a guest. Her name is Vi La Bianca. How are you, Vi?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Phil?
I am well, and I guess you've now become a big star in Austin, Texas, right?
So they tell me. I'm still the littlest star in the galaxy out here, though, so got a ways to go.
That's nice. Recently, as any organization will do, some people say, I've been here long enough and I've done my time and I'm going to leave room for other people, or other different reasons that there's some changes. And you have become one of the co-hosts. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I am now working with the atheist community of Austin, and I am the co-host of Secular Sexuality and also now one of the regular co-hosts of Talk Heathen, which is very, very exciting.
Very nice. Now, are you also on Atheist Experience?
I have made a couple appearances as a co-host, but one of the things that we're working with now is we only have a limited number of hosts, and so in order to maintain brand identity, we kind of divvied each other up into different groups. So I am the Talk Heathen crew. I'll be representing them. But yeah, I've been on AXP a few times, which was definitely a thrill because those shows, man, I've watched them for years. So that was very exciting.
Well, that is the one podcast other than my own, of course, the Phil Ferguson Show.
Of course.
That I listen to, dare I say, religiously, because it gives me a feel and a vibe for what crazy things Christians might be coming up with or what's trending. So that's something I always do. But I often do find the callers, what is it? I can't. I mean, sometimes I have to skip through 4 or 5 minutes until that person is done because it's so inane. But you said you do more Talk Heathen.
Yes.
Tell us about that podcast. Who's on it other than you, and what does it do?
Oh, perfect. Well, Talk Heathen is kind of Atheist Experience's little sibling. Been around for only a couple of years. It was started by Eric Murphy and Jamie Boone, who both are the reason I'm in Austin. More on that later. So they started it up, I believe, 3 seasons ago. This next week is going to be our 100th episode.
Nice.
So we're super excited to make that bump, hit that bump. So yeah, it's kind of the same deal, talk show, theists call in, but the format isn't as confrontational. We encourage repeat callers so we can actually track the progress of certain people and continue conversations week to week. So a little bit different, a little bit more laid back, but same format.
I like it. So, it's just, you said it's not as argumentative. I have listened to some of it, but you're just questioning people, the Socratic method. What's the style?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot of street epistemology type stuff. Why do you believe this? Okay, can you go into that a little bit more? Maybe could you explain how you came to that conclusion? So giving a little bit more of an open forum to the callers, but, we'll have our fair share of hang-ups as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, I want you to think about the show. Is there a favorite call that you've had, either because it was good or because it was bad? What sticks out for you?
Oh, good question. We had one caller, and there's a favorite, and then there's a really bad one. There was one caller who called in claiming that they were a messenger of God, as many do. God has many messengers out there, apparently. But this one had the answers to the way the universe worked. And this was very it was very interesting because for the life of me couldn't explain it. Which maybe if you're translating from a heavenly dialect, it's more difficult to do on air. But yeah, that was a very fun call. And then there's this one guy, Kamal, and Taku and listeners will know exactly who Kamal is. Kamal called in 2 months ago and just kind of broke down on the show and was saying how he was a disabled war vet who was living all by himself because his entire family ditched him when they found out he was an atheist. And he just broke down, and everyone in the community just rushed him with affection and with empathy. And it turns out he called back. His little brother, who had previously shunned him, saw that clip online and got in touch. And now he's got family again. Not all of them, but being able to talk to us and then that getting out online got him his family back. So that's something that to this day will make me cry if I think about it too much.
Oh, yeah, that is fascinating. I don't think I've ever achieved something so cool as that. I know over the years people have credited me for helping them out of religion or out of bad situations, but that is very, very cool. Congratulations.
Oh man, I mean, I just sat there and nodded my head. It just being able to have a platform where people can come to say things that they need to say, I think is the main thing.
Yeah, I think it was the closest thing I can think of for myself to that is I was at a conference once, and after the conference was over, we were in a bar, like 100 people, and someone at the conference, someone with the local group, brought a friend of theirs, and we're talking about, someone they're both in their early 30s, and the person they brought with them was not an atheist, but, we're Christian, I guess, in general, but that wasn't their problem. Their problem was that their spouse was abusive, and somehow we got talking about that, and I made it very, very clear that they should escape that situation, that they deserve better than that, and I did not know, but after that night in the bar, the person who was facing this abuse told their friend, okay, I'm now ready to take your advice as my friend because someone else confirmed that you are right and that I should leave this situation. So they made plans, and she left her husband and took her kids and went into hiding. And 2 years later, I ran into her, and she said that I was the reason that she did that, and I made her life better. And I was like, I just told you not to stand by and get hit. I mean, I felt like I did so little, and I think it might have been her Christian upbringing, because when other women were telling her to leave, she didn't listen. But when a man told her, I think it held more weight, and that's not cool. But in this case, I'm glad, I think.
Yeah. But no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Isn't it crazy? I mean, it's just listening and offering an opinion where you can. And it does things. It moves mountains, and, to steal a Christian phrase.
Yeah. You mentioned another podcast you're on. What's that one?
Oh, yeah. That one is Secular Sexuality. And it's a little bit more laid back. It's a little bit more fun. We talk mostly about different issues around sex and gender, and kind of are trying to break down some of the stereotypes and some of the restrictions that purity culture as a whole has kind of imposed on us as Americans. So we'll have, we invited a couple on to show us how to make homemade BDSM toys. We've had, last week we had Dr. Susan Block, I believe her name is, the author of the Bonobo Way, and we talked about bonobos and how we're related to them.
They're frisky.
Yes, they were. It was a very interesting conversation. But yeah, so we'll just talk about different sexual things and kind of debunk some mythology around that. And then if callers want to call in, they're welcome to, and we've had a couple of repeat callers, but that's not the focus of that show.
Very nice. Now, you also just dropped in the conversation a few minutes ago that you got to Austin because of something.
Yes.
You want to share a story about that?
Sure, yeah. So we met at the American Atheist Conference in Cincinnati this last April, right?
Correct.
Right. So while I was there, I had been living in Columbus at the time. I was part of it sounded a small kind of grassroots political activism group around maintaining separation of church and state. So I was like, okay, I've been in activism and politics in the past, but kind of the new atheist bent was kind of taken over and inspiring me. So I went out there to Cincinnati for the conference, paid the extra $250 to get into the VIP drinks lounge, where all the show hosts were. And the two of the first people that I ran into were Eric Murphy and Jamie Boone from Talk Heathen. So we got to talking, and I mentioned that all the cool atheists were out in Austin doing cool stuff. And Eric just looked at me and he's like, why aren't you moving out there? I was like, oh, haha, that's funny. That's really funny. Good joke, Eric. And then the next month, everything changed. My relationship ended. And by June 1st, I was in Austin. So that conference literally changed my life.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I know it's one of those things that I think it'd be very cool to be in Austin myself, at least maybe during the winter, because the winter in Chicago sucks. I mean, you were in Columbus. You had pretty similar weather.
Oh, yeah. No, Columbus was terrible. I'm sorry anyone here who may be from Columbus, but I do not miss it.
Did you hear what happened in Montana a few weeks ago?
I don't think so.
They got September snow, and in some places up to 4 feet over the weekend.
What?
Yeah.
In September?
In September.
Okay.
So they're not going to see the ground for, let's see, October, November, December, January, February, March, April. What is that, like 7 months, 8 months maybe? So, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, you could live
there.
Yeah,
because climate change isn't real. Not happening.
Yeah, and of course, that's one of the predicted effects, that snowstorms could be dramatically heavier because there's more moisture in the air. So, yeah, that's going to be fun. I got to get another. I've had a climate expert on in the past. I haven't done that in a while. So for you, did you grow up secular atheist? Did you grow up in a church? What was your story?
Ooh. So no and no, kind of. Definitely not secular. My family was about as conservative, fundamentalist as you could be. So conservative and fundamentalist, in fact, that we were not affiliated with any church because they were all too lax and lenient.
Of course.
So my dad started his own little home church, and that's where we got our spiritual instruction. And it quickly, because there were no checks and balances and no other people to kind of bounce stuff off of, became very cult-like, very not healthy. But yeah, that was my experience until I left for college. And then I went to Messiah College out in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And so Christian upbringing there. I know we talked before we started recording about me learning Koine Greek, which would only have been possible if I had been going to a fairly conservative Christian school.
Very nice. So you learned a language that's close to useless unless you want to translate the Bible.
Basically, yes. Unless I want to stop apologists from getting on my back. Because a lot of them tend to say, well, I read the Bible. You probably don't read the Bible. And my response, of course, is, oh, I have. In fact, I've translated it from the original Greek. So don't tell me what's in that book.
Yeah, I like it. So you went to college and you met people with different perspectives. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Still all Christian, at least as far as I was aware at the time.
Right.
Because, you can't come out as an atheist on a Christian campus. That won't go well for you.
Yeah, it's hard.
But yeah, so I met a bunch of different people with different interpretations of the Bible, different ideas of what God was, different ideas about heaven and hell. And I started changing my own views, as one does. And so by the end of my 4-year experience there, I kind of looked back and I was like, wait a minute. I have changed my belief system so much that it doesn't even really represent anything that most Christians would identify as Christianity. I've basically come up with my own religion in an attempt to make it fit with where I was morally and intellectually. And that was kind of the first step into deconversion, was the realization that, I'm making up my God in order to come alongside what I already know to be true about the world and about morals and about myself. So yeah, that was an interesting experience.
Yeah, exposure to different ideas is a very common theme for people deconverting, of course, reading the Bible. And if you were learning, what kind of Greek did you say it was?
Koine. Koine, I believe, or Kione.
Sure. And so, you had this really in-depth understanding of what's in the Bible, and that can also be really detrimental to one's faith.
Oh, yes.
Because you start reading it and going, what? That didn't come up when I was a kid. What did you discover in the Bible that really just still to this day haunts you? What kind of stuff?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I think most of the stuff that sticks with me is stuff that probably isn't in the Bible per se, at least not across interpretations. I realized once I got out that I suffered from rapture anxiety.
Oh.
And that I had as a child, my entire childhood, and that it had caused what I now deal with, which is generalized anxiety disorder. So what that is basically, for those of you who don't know what the rapture is, I was taught my entire childhood that I wouldn't grow up because God was coming back before I grew up, or before I died, one or the other. And God was going to take everyone who was faithful to him to heaven, and in a flash, in an instant, we would disappear, and everyone who was flawed or found lacking would remain on earth to go through the tribulation, which is just the most horrific, nightmarish trials and torture. And for me, as a kid, I couldn't close doors because I thought that if I opened the door to my bedroom or to the bathroom after it being closed, my entire family would be gone, and I'd be stuck alone on a planet that was about to be doused in fire and bugs. Because, you scare kids with tales of bugs as large as they are.
Yeah, I could see how that might induce some anxiety.
Just a tad. And just the idea that I didn't think I was going to survive past the age of 18 or 19. Like, I just didn't envision my life as a thing that was going to happen because I was told that I'd be in heaven by that point.
And were you
it was kind of interesting.
Were you in homeschool until you went to college?
Yes, I was. I was homeschooled.
Okay. And was it adequate? Were you able
to
compete in college, or did you have some catching up to do?
It depends on the area. My mom was actually a really good teacher, and Pennsylvania was one of the areas that did have requirements. So every couple of years, we would have a third party come in and administer testing to make sure we were at least generally up to speed with the rest of the world. So there was a little bit of regulation. And in terms of writing, in terms of English, in terms of history, anything that didn't really touch onto biblical stuff, I got a really good education in, I think. I think my mom did a good job there. But when it came to things like science or, the darker parts of U.S. history, glossed right over or not discussed at all because we were as conservative as we were Christian.
Right. Well, all right. And so, you had these struggles in college, and did it continue after college? And was there anything that was kind of like a last straw for you?
One of the last straws for me was after college. I was living at home for the summer before I went to Portland, Oregon for grad school. And I was having coffee with a cousin of mine who I had always looked up to as kind of a spiritual mentor, somebody who knew a lot more than I did and who was more connected to God. And at that point, I was kind of detached from the whole thing, but still not calling myself an atheist. And I was having a conversation with them, and I mentioned that I didn't see God as gendered. Like, I didn't think that God was a man. And they were mind blown, and they were shocked. They were asking me, like, wait, what do you mean? Why would you think that? And when I tried to explain that my reasoning, based on all of these Bible classes that I had to take so many Bible classes, the reasoning was that, humans wrote the Bible, and humans developed the theology after the Bible was written, and the majority of them were men, so of course God would be portrayed as a man, because that was just the way things were at the time.
Right.
And I used St. Augustine as an example. It's like, like when St. Augustine wrote his City of God, and they go, who's St. Augustine? And it blew my mind because here was this person who was following an interpretation of their holy book without understanding how some of the most influential church fathers were playing a role in how they even viewed the book in the first place. And that kind of put that final nail in that coffin of, these people to whom I've looked up to all this time, they don't know more than me. In fact, in a lot of cases, I know more than them.
Yeah,
so
that's a road to atheism right there.
Yep.
Knowing a lot about the Bible. Is there anything else that we specifically need to cover before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think this is a great overview. Thank you so much for having me on. And if you do want to follow me, I'm in the works of putting together a podcast, but that's not probably coming out until early 2020. So in the meantime, if you want to follow me on Twitter, that's at Author Confusion. Then that's where you'll get links to all the videos that I put up, updates on everything. I post way too much on there, but that's kind of the place to go to connect with me.
Very nice. Are you going to any upcoming conferences?
Good question. I don't think I am, but there is a conference in Chicago, actually. I believe it's the Women of Color
Beyond
Belief conference that's happening this coming weekend.
Yeah,
so,
and for my listeners,
shout out to everyone out there.
For my listeners, this coming weekend probably means a couple weekends ago, because this probably won't go up in time.
Oh, that's right. I'm used to live format.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because sometimes I am, at the last minute getting interviews, and luckily right now I'm at a position where I've got a couple extra. Not that you're any less important, but you're not going to go up in the next couple of days. So,
hey, I admire that forethought.
There you go. Well, Vi, thank you so much for being on the show, and I look forward to seeing you somewhere again soon. And maybe next spring I'll make my annual pilgrimage down and be on the Atheist Experience again, and we can say hello.
That sounds amazing. Thanks so much, Phil.
You bet. Have a great day.
as you get older, you just ditch certain things as you get older, and it's a pleasure to do, right? I mean, for example, right, religion is a very good example. I wouldn't be a very spiritual man, right? I don't believe in God, right? Still Catholic. Because there's nothing you can do when you're Catholic. Once you've started Catholic, frankly, there's no real way to stop being Catholic. Even not believing in God isn't regarded as sufficient reason to get out of the Catholic Church. You'd think it'd be fairly fundamental to the whole thing, but no. Catholicism, the stickiest, most adhesive religion in the world. There's no website you can deregister online. You can't put up your membership card in front of a priest and go, feck you, I'm out of here, and walk away. You could join the Taliban. You'd merely be regarded as a bad Catholic. I'm presuming a large chunk of you probably were raised Protestant. Give me sure if you had any Protestant upbringing at all. A fair few of you, right? Now, when you do the wafer thing, right, and take the hooks or whatever, thing, it represents the body of Christ. It's a metaphor, it's a symbol of the body of Christ. Oh, not when you're Catholic. When you're Catholic, it actually is the body of Christ. You're supposed to actually believe that it turns into the flesh of Christ in your mouth. Nobody fully explained this to me as a child. I would have spotted the flaw relatively quickly in that. I would have gone, hang on, I might be 8, but I've eaten enough burgers, chicken McNuggets, right? Fish fingers and rashers to know there is no animal flesh in the world that jams itself to the roof of your mouth and hoovers all of the moisture out of your body until you're looking at your mother going, can I hang it down with my finger? It's stuck in the roof of my mouth. And she's going, do not take it down with your finger. It's the body of Christ. Leave it where it is. You're making a show of me in the church. You're desiccating me from the inside out. Desiccating, by the way.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
You're still there. I'm delighted. Thank you again, of course, for listening and continuing to listen to The Phil Ferguson Show. If you like the show, you can go show a little love at Patreon, patreon.com/Phil, and you can become a patron for as little as $1 per show. I don't ask for a monthly amount because sometimes I don't put out that many shows in a month. And matter of fact, that's going to happen again because only a few days from now, I'm going to be heading off to Las Vegas for the Center for Inquiry's SciCon conference, and I do hope to see you there. And of course, if you go, and if you can get there early enough, on the 17th, we're going to meet around 4:15 to 4:30 at the registration desk for the conference, or near the registration desk, because I don't want to get in the way. And we're going to go across the street. We're going to leave I think it's the Flamingo. We're going to leave and go across the street. We're going to go to Wahlburger and get some dinner. And then, of course, we're going to visit next door the Fuel Bar and have some drinks. And a Fuel Bar is one of those places where they throw bottles and make really fun and fancy foo-foo drinks. If you're just a beer drinker, it may not be the place for you. I don't even know if they sell beers. I'm assuming they must. But they do fancy cocktail drinks with umbrellas and stuff like that. So we're going to have some fun. You don't have to drink. You don't have to eat. You could just join us and have a nice time. And the plan is to be back into the casino in time for the opening reception, where there's probably going to be some snacks and maybe you can buy a drink. But if there's 600 or 700 people, might be a long line to get a drink. So if you're looking for something to do at the CFI, Center for Inquiry's Conference, SciCon. I don't know. That's why it's called SciCon. I can't call it CFI-Con. But anyway, that's in Vegas on the 17th. So after this show goes up, I have to get ready for that and, of course, do my job and all those other fun things. And then as soon as I get back, I've only got a couple days where I can do more stuff. I hope to get a podcast made and up right after that. But then my wife and I head to Florida. We're going to take a few days off, probably spend a full day at Epcot, and might spend a full day at the new Star Wars adventure park thing that Disney built. So we'll see if we can fit that in. And then, of course, we're going to Free Flow, the Florida Free Thought Conference, and then I'll be back. So at some point, there might be a week or two where I skip, so my apologies in advance. one of the other things that I wanted to cover, and I kind of meant to do it at the beginning of the show, but I got distracted, is a little update on cryptocurrencies. I had someone bug me and said, how are cryptocurrencies doing since you last talked about them? And that's been almost 2 years ago now. And so I went and looked at the 12 biggest names, I think, from a couple different sources who said that these are the most important cryptocurrencies. And I looked at the high that they've had and where they are now. And this is dated a little bit. I did this about a week ago, but it hasn't changed much. Bitcoin specifically was $20,089 at its peak, and it's now around 8,000, give or take. And of course, it had bounced back up to 12 for a few weeks, but now it's 8 again. And so its net loss is about minus 60%. And then I'm going to rip through 11 more here just to give you an example. Bitcoin Cash, down 95%. Cardano, I guess that's what it's called, down 65.5%. Dash Coin down 96%. EOS down 87%. Ethereum down 88%. Litecoin down 85%. Monero down 89%. Neo down 96%. Stellar down 94%. XRP, also called Ripple, is down 94%. And Zcash is down only 70% from its high. So hopefully you got out or didn't buy Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. And who knows if they're going to go up from here. You could buy some of these at ridiculously low prices and they could go up or they could go down. They're not based on anything. They don't produce anything. They don't create anything. They don't owe you anything. And if more people want to buy them, the prices go up. If more people want to sell them, the prices go down. It's purely supply and demand. Still not something I'm interested in, but if you want to try it, have fun. I'm not going to recommend it, and I can't imagine that I'm ever going to recommend it. So a little bit on that. Also, the New York Times created a nice little interactive chart that has been going around showing how income tax rates relative to income brackets has changed since 1950 to today. And in some extreme cases, people are paying dramatically lower taxes in the really, really, really top levels of income than the average person making $30,000, $50,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year. So there's that. I don't like that. I think people that make more income, we talked about it early in the show. Sorry, it's just kind of in my head because people keep talking about it. Other things, of course, if you like the show, you can leave reviews. iTunes has a place for reviews, and Stitcher has a place for reviews. Sadly, it looks like neither platform has a new review for me, so I'm very sad. If you like the show, of course, I would appreciate it not only kicking in $1 or more at Patreon, but going to iTunes or Stitcher and leaving a 5-star review. I almost forgot this too. The book that I was reading that has to do with the FIRE movement, or helped actually inspire the FIRE movement that we talked about in the earlier segment, is called Your Money or Your Life. I'm only about halfway through it, and I was hoping to finish it by the time I did this closing segment, and I had not read it before I did the piece on the FIRE movement. It's not an awful book, but it's wildly repetitive and redundant, and it's also a challenge for me because when I read a book like this, I know all these things. I've been doing this for almost 24 years, give or take, and it doesn't have a lot of new material. But if you are having trouble saving, if you can't seem to get past 3 or 4% in your 401k and that's all you can do, maybe this book is the little kick in the butt that you need. It talks about calculating how much you make per hour. So what is your time really worth? What is the value of your time? And then it helps you categorize and collect what you spend and looking at the comparison so you can maybe have a new way of looking at what you're doing and why. And if that's what you want to keep doing, cool. But if you want to make some changes, I think it might be helpful. So if your biggest problem is trying to figure out how to come up with money, you're making money, but you're also spending all of that and have nothing left over, maybe it's a book that can make a difference for you. It's called Your Money or Your Life. Updated version in 2018 is going to be my recommendation for that. It doesn't go into one of my 4 books, but it could. The 4 books that I recommend. It's not awful. Like I said, it was very redundant and repetitive for me. But if you're kind of new to this stuff or having trouble saving money, it just might sink in this different book to make it click for you and figure out how to save. Of course, there's stories out there of people saving 30, 50, even 70% of their income. And if you can save 70% of your income for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, you would be able to live off that portfolio for the rest of your life. But it means if you're making 100 and living on 30, you would be able to continue to living on 30 for the rest of your life. Not really what I want to do. And everybody has their own different choices and desires, what they want to do in life. But if you can make really good money and live on next to nothing for 6, 10, maybe 12 years, you could theoretically be in a position to never have to work again. You may not be living on a high income, but you also don't have to work. Other things that are potential problems with that is that if there's a material or significant amount of inflation like we had in the 70s and early 80s, your plan might have a harder time of succeeding. You might have to go back to work. The other weird thing is often when you're working throughout your life, generally most people make more and more money the more years that you work. You might miss out on that. The other thing, of course, for me, my job is great fun. I get to talk to really cool people all around the country and even a few in other countries and help them with their money, help them figure out how much they can save, figuring out where to invest it and how to retire. And I dig that. It's not really like a whole lot of work. So it's good fun for me. So I have no reason to just up and retire next year. And of course, the thing I would have is what would I do? I'm sure I could find something. I could go play more Frisbee golf. How about that? Go spend even more time practicing Italian. Anyway, again, I'm rambling. I think we've got our whole hour here. So thank you for listening. I do expect to get another show out in a week and a half, but then it's probably going to be 2 weeks after that. So I appreciate you listening. And if you go to CFI or Free Flow Conference in Florida, I hope to see you there. And if you do see me, please feel free to come up and say hello. Until then, ciao.
But I was born too late to play in the Rolling Stones. I don't know Jimmy Page, I never met Yoko Ono. Standing with a strap, I'm rock and roll's bastard son. Go out, get drunk, get laid, have fun. Don't got $1 million, don't drive a Cadillac. Give me half a chance, cause I'm not dead yet. Not dead yet. Not dead yet. I'm a mad dog fighting with the wall against my back. You better get a bigger gun, I'm not dead yet. I've been machine gun, handgun, hijack, left for dead. Dive bomb, napalm, nuclear warheaded. Dropped from a jet plane with no parachute. Shot by a firing squad and raped by a business suit. Dancing on a landmine, one leg left. I can still crawl and I'm not dead yet. Not dead yet. Not dead yet. I'm a mad dog fighting with the wall against my back. You better get a bigger gun, I'm not dead yet. Well, you're bigger, rougher, meaner, tougher, dirtier and uglier and sneakier and trickier. You wanna shoot me with a gun, cut me with a knife. Take your bare hands and rip out my eyes. Kick me in the balls and you bit me in the neck. Well, hit me again, cause I'm not dead yet. Not dead yet. Not dead yet. I'm a mad dog fighting with the wall against my back. You better get a bigger gun, I'm not dead yet. There's a girl at the bar wants to